Hi, my name is Brandon, and I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery. Typically, when we start a task, we have a beginning of the task and an end of the task. So we start the task and then we get done with it, and it's move on to the next task, and then it's the same thing. And we like that because that helps us create order, and it helps make things manageable, and it helps things not be chaotic. But when it comes to a spiritual journey, when it comes to the kind of journey that we have to undertake for lifelong recovery, we are faced with the prospect of something that's never ending, that we have to do our entire lives, and that can be intimidating. But it can also be beautiful if you look at it in a certain way. And I want to read a passage from Going to Pieces Without Falling Apart by Mark Epstein, where he talks about this a little bit. He says, in the centuries since since Buddha's first teaching, it has become customary to speak of the spiritual path as if it were something like a well-marked highway with entrance ramps and speed limits and even rest stops and service stations. People speak of being on the path as if it were clear where it starts and stops. But if we look at what the Buddha actually taught, we see immediately that his eightfold path of right livelihood, action, speech, mindfulness, concentration, effort, understanding, and thought are really parameters rather than way stations on a journey. The spiritual path means making a path rather than following one. It is a very personal process, unique to each individual. And I like that line of the spiritual path means making a path rather than following one. Because this idea that instead of following a path that someday will end and it's a neat little path that, we just have to walk down, that instead of doing that and really looking at it as making a path through the wilderness and finding our way around the trees and finding our way through the undergrowth and the natural way that everything flows, and really following that, but picking our own way through the wilderness. I like that idea a lot more because it indicates that there is no end, there is no beginning, there's no particular way that this is supposed to be done, and depending on where you are and the perspective that you're coming at it from, it's going to be different for everybody. I think that's really important. A lot of the intimidation that I had in doing it, when I was faced with the prospect of having to do a program like AA, and having to do any kind of spiritual program of recovery every day for the rest of my life, that's intimidating, and it's understanding why it's intimidating. It's understandable why it's intimidating. But when I really looked at what that involved in terms of self-discipline, in terms of getting to know myself, and then in terms of trying to extend love and kindness to things around me, trying to grow more compassionate, to try to take the values that I held important in life and start to exhibit those values, start to live through those values, and then through love and compassion, put those values into the world. I started to see this spiritual journey as something that was not only worthwhile, but was also something I wanted to engage in. And all of a sudden, the idea of trying to pick a path through the forest got to be, forever, for the rest of my life, got to be a less daunting task, and got to be something that I really wanted to do. And so that's what he's getting at here, is that, this path finding that we do in a spiritual journey is something that we can engage in a way that it's actually satisfying, and it actually helps us to get more in contact with the things around us. And he describes this really well in a metaphor that he uses a little bit later in the chapter, where he talks about on a piece of property that he owns trying to make a path, and that there were two options. He could either bulldoze through the trees and the bushes and the undergrowth and just make a straight path, or he could have people make a winding path that followed the natural flow of the land. And he chose the second option and found that it was so much more satisfying because it seemed so much more in tune with the way the land was supposed to flow. And so the other part that I want to read is, he says, in building a path through the self to the far shore of awareness, we have to carefully pick our way through our own wilderness. If we can put our minds into a place of surrender, we will have an easier time feeling the contours of the land. We do not have to break our way through as much as we have to find our way around the major obstacles. I like that a lot. We do not have to cure every neuroses. We just have to learn how to not be caught by them. So I like that. I really, really like this metaphor that in the spiritual journey, we're going to surrender. And for anybody who's working an AA program, you know, the idea of surrender is extremely important. And it becomes important, I think, in most programs of spiritual improvement. And then not breaking our way through as much as finding our way around the major obstacles. And I think that it really gets to something that's come up a lot in my own journey, is that, you know, when I try to break through obstacles, when I try to fight against obstacles, it gets a lot more difficult than if I just try to work with them and find my way around them. And when I say find my way around them, I don't mean avoiding them. I mean just accepting them and then working with them rather than trying to bulldoze my way through them. All of this is to say that the spiritual journey, it does not have a beginning and end, and we don't start this journey the first day in treatment and then finish with it the day we finish our step work with a sponsor. And anybody who has done the 12 steps of AA knows that the 12th step itself is a lifelong dedication to spreading the word to other people. So it's something that we have to accept as part of lifetime recovery. I find myself embracing that idea more and more every day, because what started out as an intimidating prospect of having to dedicate a lifetime to spiritual improvement and to spiritual work on myself has quickly changed into an exciting proposition. It excites me that I get to do this kind of work on myself for the rest of my life. That's exciting to me. The life of complacency, the life of just not caring about this kind of thing, the life of just overall dissatisfaction that I was leading in my addiction, that doesn't attract me anymore. A life of continuous spiritual improvement, that really is what drives me these days. And that is one of the things that makes it so easy for me to choose not to engage in my addictive behavior, knowing that I've got this work that I want to do to make my path. If I go back to that addictive behavior, I'm not even going to be on a path. I'm going to be in the bushes somewhere, and that ain't a good place to be. That's it for me today. I'll be back tomorrow with more. In the meantime, have a good one.